Good morning. Welcome to Biology 102, your first tea time. This YouTube playlist is for this particular class of biology for non-majors. On BB Learn, you will find things like your syllabus and the lectures in their PowerPoint slide form. You will find your study sheets and your exams and quizzes. This YouTube channel is a place to go when you can't attend a lecture or if you're online, so that you get kind of the nuts and bolts of the topics that are covered in the in-person lecture. Today we're going to cover what does biology mean and kind of the overview for this particular semester. So let's get started. Biology is the scientific study of living things, and in this particular semester, we're going to cover the first unit is ecology and conservation, the second unit is cells and processes, third unit evolution, fourth unit genetics, and fifth unit human body form and functions. So there are 5 units in this particular semester. However, all of these units will be dealing with different properties of living things. So I want to talk about this definition. Biology is the scientific study of living things, and I want to break it apart first asking you, what is a scientific study? So what is the difference? I know you walk around your neighborhoods and the campus, and you actually probably think about like why plants are green or why is the sky blue. You ask questions, but a scientific study is a little bit different. If you notice over here, scientific studies, obviously scientists start with observations and questions about the world around them, but they go beyond that. They state predictions that are testable, and then they complete controlled experiments where they have controlled variables so that they can control exactly what they're testing. And finally, not shown on this diagram, once a scientific study is finished, it goes into peer review. So you send it off to other experts. Other experts will weigh in on whether the scientific study is valid or not. They will replicate your study to check to see if the understanding is what they find as well in their own replications. And so these kinds of pieces really make a scientific study different than kind of our normal questions and answers that we get in life. Scientists are going to run these controlled experiments. They are going to send it to a peer-reviewed audience, and then there's replication involved in these scientific studies that are a little bit different than our normal everyday life. Now, what exactly is a living thing? Because biology is the scientific study of living things. So what exactly differentiates a living thing from a rock or something that is non-living? Scientists, this is kind of hard actually. It's interesting that a toddler might be able to answer whether something is alive or not alive, but when you come to actually defining those properties of life, it becomes a little bit more difficult. But scientists have agreed on 7 things that I want to share with you today. These 7 properties of life are things that we see in living things across the board, whether it's a bacteria, a fungus, an animal, a plant. And so I want to share with you these properties of life. The first property is order. So how do living things have order? Well, order is this complex and sort of organized body of one or more cells. So when we say that word order, we're talking about how we build the patterns of cells that become the single-celled all the way to the multicellular organisms that we see on planet Earth. You can see that this ponderosa pine cone here has a certain pattern to it because the cells are in a particular order or organization. Early development shown at the bottom here also has an order to it. And the cells are going to behave and look a certain way during that particular order. Now, how do living things carry out the second property, regulation? So regulation is something that living things can do that rocks and other non-living things cannot do. Regulation is about the environment around us changing rapidly, but living things having the ability to really control and maintain internal conditions. You might have learned this word in high school as homeostasis or a steady state, and living things can carry out this steady state or keep their internal environment very, very steady. Like this lizard is regulating its body temperature, just like you're regulating your body temperature as well. The third trait is growth and development. By growth and development, we mean that all living things have sets of genes that allow them to grow and develop over their lifespans in a particular pattern. I show a green mamba over here. A green mamba is going to reach almost half to two-thirds of its adult size within a few months of growth, which is very different than like humans, but it has a certain pattern that makes a green mamba different than a black mamba or a python or other snakes and things like that we see in nature. The next trait or property of life is all living things need energy. And why do we need energy? We need energy to do our life work. Our life work can be photosynthesizing, so capturing sunlight energy to build a simple sugar. Our life work can be moving around or hunting or consuming other things. But all living things are going to need energy in some way. Energy is the ability to do work, and that energy is going to allow us to do our life work, all of those necessary tasks that living things need to do. The next property of life is responding to the environment. And why do living things respond? Living things can respond to the stimuli around them. And often this is due to survival, right? So trying to survive, find food, find energy, do all these other like sort of characteristics of life. And even things like fungus will grow towards different mating strains or grow away from certain chemicals that might be toxic. Plants and things like that, like this Venus flytrap that I show here, have different ways to like sort of trigger responses when an insect is present. So there are lots of different responses we see, but all living things can respond in some way. The next property of life is reproduction. And reproduction for living things, you know that rocks don't reproduce themselves, but living things have the ability to reproduce, not willy-nilly, but reproduce their own species. So hippos are going to reproduce to make more hippos, crocodiles to make more crocodiles, humans to make more humans. And this reproduction is a really special feature of sort of living things. Again, differentiating them from non-living things like rocks. The seventh and last property of life is adaptations. Adaptations are special to living things. Adaptations are traits that help an organism survive, like the camouflage you see right here on this insect, allowing it to blend in to the leaves around it. These adaptations are consequences of evolution by natural selection. So they accumulate in populations and basically give living things a bag of tricks to help them survive in their environments. So those are the 7 properties of life. And I want you to know this definition. Biology is the scientific study of life, and these 7 properties. Throughout the rest of this semester, we will be looking at these properties and studying them in various ways. So I introduced them today because things like regulation and energy are going to come up throughout the whole entire semester. So you're going to see and revisit these properties of life several times. Your assignment for this first lecture is to print out your study sheet, number 1 from BB Learn, and there are the first 2 questions on that study sheet have to do with this overview. So I will see you next time.